Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
To make switching to the new Boost Mobile risk-free, we're offering a 30-day money-back guarantee.
So why wouldn't you switch from Verizon or T-Mobile?
Because you have nothing to lose. Boost Mobile is offering a 30-day money-back guarantee.
No, I asked why wouldn't you switch from Verizon or T-Mobile?
Oh.
Wouldn't.
Because you love wasting money as a way to punish yourself because your mother never showed you enough love as a child?
Whoa, easy there.
Yeah.
Applies to online activations. Requires port in and auto pay. Customers activating in stores may be charged non-refundable activation fees.
On average, you'll have to wait 31 days to see an OBGYN. And if you're dealing with an infection or outbreak, you know you need care fast. That's where Wisp comes in. Connect with a U.S. licensed provider online and pick up safe, effective treatment at your local pharmacy that same day. Plus, get birth control and more delivered in all 50 states. Take control with comprehensive sexual and reproductive care, all from your phone. Wisp. That's hellowisp.com. The waiting room can wait.
Who do you mean?
The people here. They do not want us here. Audrey, Attila's Catholic wife, does not want us here. She does not want us here.
Hello, guys, and welcome to another brand new episode of Hollywood Gold. I'm your host, Daniela Taplin Lundberg, and I'm here with Vanessa Mandel. Hi.
Hi, I'm so excited to dig into this episode.
Oh, I happen to be one of those people who's obsessed with The Brutalist and the look of it. Yeah. And we're about to dive in with Lol Crawley, who is the British DP of the film and has worked with Brady Corbet since his first film. So he's like really come along with him, did the first, then did Vox Lux, and just obviously did The Brutalist and is probably going to do his next film with him. So I'm so excited just to understand like how this look came to be. They shot on VistaVision, which I didn't even really know what that was, but excited to hear the scoop.
Yeah. And we've never talked to a DP before, so I'm really excited to get into this side of filmmaking. I think we talk about a lot of different sides, and it's fun to, get the visual perspective and see how it comes together.
So exciting. So let's get going.
Let's do it.
Lol Crawley, thank you so much for joining us today. I am so excited. You're the first DP we've ever interviewed.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Why don't you start from your first memory of The Brutalist? And I know you had worked with Brady Corbet on Vox Lux before.
Yeah, it's actually my third film with Brady. So yeah. So the first one was a film called The Childhood of a Leader that we also shot in Budapest, as we did with The Brutalist, and that was sort of 2015. But that film was his first feature, and obviously, well, I mean, not obviously, but it wasn't mine. Mine was back in sort of 2006. So it's always a thing with a first-time director. You don't know because it's. You always, you're very much taken with the personality of the director and the script itself. But until you're actually in the moment,
of it, yeah,
you don't know, which way it's going to shake out. So it's always a little bit of a leap of faith with with someone you haven't worked with before, or someone who doesn't have a body of work that speaks somewhat for itself.
Do you mean you don't know whether the filmmaker is going to have as much reverence for the look and framing of the film as he or she might have for whatever else, performances, whatever else is going on? Or what do you sort of...
Not necessarily that, but that's an interesting point. That could be part of it. I think just a tough thing to bring home successfully, a movie, a director is not just directing the actors, you know, they're directing all of us, right? And the worst scenario in the world is if I'm ahead of that process, or if I'm somehow kind of like too much in control of the story being told. You know, like I've always thought of it. I mean, I think DPs have different approaches, and some DPs, I'm sure, are much more dogmatic. You hear stories of, you know, whether it's like Gordon Willis working with Coppola. Some DPs have this very sort of impositional idea, I think, of how to look. And, you know, and I think that's a way of, I'm not saying that's wrong, that's just a way of approaching a film. But for me, I have a different approach, you know, and it's like, I need to serve the story and the vision. In order to serve something, that whatever you're serving has to be very much in control, you know?
And responsive to your thoughts and ideas, because you're obviously bringing an expertise that person has hired you to bring, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just like, you know, something on paper for like a first-time filmmaker can seem like a, you know, and it's the same for a producer, of course, where, you know, you're taking a leap of faith. I mean, you take a leap of faith with every movie, you know, that you get involved in, but, you know, it's, you know, there's a bigger leap of faith with someone who doesn't have a body of work. And you're like, you know, and the more that I shoot, the more I want to be challenged. And I want, you know, like, I unconsciously kind of ask myself the question, or maybe consciously, I don't know, where am I going to be at the end of this? You know, where is this going to put me? You know, and I've never been a great strategist, and I'm not calculated. I think I want to just work with people I like on a story that I think is worth telling. You know, I mean, that's the bottom line. But at the same time, it's like, you know, it's a balance of things like, as matter of fact, as your rate, you know, like, you know, the first movie I shot was Ballast. I couldn't afford to do that anymore, you know, and unfortunately you sort of give up something because of that. Do you know what I mean? Like it's hard to sort of stay on the straight and narrow, as it were, and stay on track. I realized after Ballast, you can get seduced into projects for the wrong reasons.
Do you mean financial reasons or like what are the reasons that you get seduced?
No, I think there are other reasons, because you kind of don't want to just be a one-trick pony, or feeling like you're, you know, like I started, like if we take Ballast for an example, available light, non-actors, you know, 35 mil. There were specific things about that film that were, I was asked to shoot it because of where I'd come from, but I didn't necessarily always want to do that and be working at the mercy of available light and things like that. I wanted to do other things. But sometimes you can slightly stray from the path and get involved in things that aren't quite, you know, maybe they're just not things that you're great at, or you know, I think there's something like, if people have recognized something about my work, there's something sort of integral across all the films, something that's sort of like a commonality. Like there's something that there's something you have to protect, or something that is in I worry about words like innate, but some innate thing that you can bring to it. And I think somehow I feel if you betray that in some way, or you get involved in a project that is not aligned with that, it's not as successful, if that makes sense.
Right. You're like betraying the things that brought you to it in the first place. And I find this with a lot of talent in Hollywood. You know, it's most easily seen in actors sometimes, where you see great talents sort of start to follow things that feel like they're the one thing after the other, but there's not necessarily like a larger philosophy behind them. And then sometimes you see those actors like kind of stop and take stock. I mean, I would say like Matthew McConaughey is a great example of that, where like, you know, he called it the reconnaissance. When he like was doing all these like rom-coms suddenly, and he was going into this world where he was making a lot of money and very successful, but then he just stopped and went to Dallas Buyers Club and kind of reset what his purpose was. And so that resonates for me when you say you kind of have to have a clear purpose.
I mean, I think it comes back to that idea of sort of what we define as progress, right? So like, oh, well, he started on a small indie movie in Mississippi, but now he's shooting Marvel 12 or what, you know what I mean? And you're like, okay, but size and budget increase is not necessarily definitive of a progression,
No, it's like, it's a great question that, I think we all as creators need to examine, because you're right. You throw yourself into a project, and then if that project is successful, in theory, you're thrown all sorts of other opportunities, and you're in the forest, and all you can do is sort of react, or, and so I totally agree that it to me, it's one of the most difficult things is to maintain your sense of self and purpose, and what is growing you as a creator.
Yeah, and coming back to that idea of like, listen, I there's some things I just I'm not good at, like, or have not perfected or chosen to perfect. I'm not great at, I never shot. I don't get called to do a lot of cosmetic, beauty commercials, right? Harris Savides did. He managed to do that and shoot all of the beautiful films that I'm much more kind of influenced by, Birth, for example, and Zodiac and things like this. But, like, I think that's fine, though, because I think otherwise the danger is you become slightly jack of all trades, master of none. If you spread yourself too thinly, I think it's okay to be like, listen, this is where my strength is. And this way that I see the world, or whatever that singular kind of vision or take on something is the thing to protect, is the thing to recognize, is the thing to nurture. And hopefully other people, see value in that as well. And they want that. And that's the thing that kind of keeps you on the straight and narrow, I think,
Well, I have so many questions that I want to ping pong from that. But the one thing I'll just jump to the Brutalist really quickly is like, Lol, you are an incredibly talented filmmaker, but for whatever reason, this film is the film that I think people are just going bananas over, right? And the sort of inventiveness that you brought that feels at once nostalgic, but also completely fresh. It's like, it feels like the greatest platform for your skill and artistry. Like, that's sort of my sense of things. I kind of want to understand, like, when you were presented with this script, and then we'll cut back to like working with Brady through the years, but did you immediately understand the task and opportunity? Like, when you were first given the script, like, tell me about how the look came together, because it is so wholly original, but also this like real sense of like regard for the past,
It's so I'll concentrate on the question because it's so tied up with my history with Brady. But essentially, I think one of the first, after Vox Lux, Brady said, listen, this is the next project, right? Literally as we wrapped.
Oh my God. So many years ago.
Well, yeah, and you just don't have that with a collaborator. So that was like a really, that just illustrates kind of what a sort of close relationship we have, which is kind of, we all sort of yearn for that. We don't always achieve it,
You're his squad. Like you're going on the journey with him wherever it's going.
Yeah, to wrap one movie and then, which is also like, what it's like, we get on very well, but making a movie is tough. So maybe you need a little time to decompress and then be like, okay, yes, he is the person to do it, So I guess it's testament to how well we get on set that you can wrap and he then says, okay, here's the next one. But it was a long process. It was 6-7 years or something, I think, between wrapping and then turning the camera over on this one, because of COVID and just other machinations of kind of low budget filmmaking that you're absolutely aware of. Basically he was like aesthetically, so I suppose there was a long sort of like discussion period between them. Between the two movies. But essentially he said, I want it to feel almost like an archive in some way. I want it to have this kind of patchwork quality. And that for me is for any DP is a little bit of a trigger word, in the sense that like you have to try and like work out what he's meaning by patchwork, because patchwork you could interpret as being inconsistent. And the whole point of, or not the whole point, but a large amount of my craft is consistency. Producers are paying for 2 or 3 weeks of DI to make it consistent. But I think there's a few things to say. So like Brady has always been like, he's very much influenced by like authors like Sebald and people like that. That he's always thought of the movie as being like, or movie making of being like a dream within a dream, a dream of a dream of a dream. So he's not really concerned with the literal. Like, even though there are certain things that you have to get right about about the Jewish experience, about being an immigrant, about architecture, brutalist architecture, it doesn't necessarily have to stand up to complete interrogation. I think unofficially the three movies are a kind of unofficial trilogy in some ways. They echo each other in some regards. I mean, thematically, if you think about it, each film is really a study of a single fictitious character who's had some kind of iconic they have their moment within history. Childhood of a Leader was about a young boy that grew up to be a fascist leader in 1930s Europe, and then obviously Celeste, Natalie Portman's character, who's this kind of like Gaga-esque character or some modern pop star, and then now Laszlo Toth, so it's like played by Adrian Brody. So it's all just kind of like, yeah, there's that, and language-wise. So the reason I bring that up is that I think even though we were trying to do something, we were trying to progress and push forward as filmmakers and as, and obviously something specific to this film, we did also rely a lot on just our shorthand and our relationship and our taste, like, I think there's, I think the more that I shoot with Brady, I don't think that will radically change necessarily. I think there'll be things that we're drawn to just because, we like it that way. Like, I don't tend to overlight. I don't tend to sort of like, I tend to sort of emulate and replicate found lighting and things like that, which Brady obviously liked from the beginning and stuff. So I think there are things like that won't radically change necessarily. Do you know what I mean?
That's so fascinating, and I feel like we could go like even further down a rabbit hole. But when you first heard about the project, was it just an idea that he was going to go right with his wife?
Yeah, and I think they had the structure of it. He didn't swing around with a script. He gave me a book on brutalist architecture, and then within a few months, I think I had the script. And then it was a process of just kind of just like he'd just keep pinging me texts and ideas of photographers, and like he's doing at the moment with the next one. And it's just like we don't tend to kind of sit down and watch movies together. It's more about paintings and ideas and thoughts. Like for example, there's a book on one of the kind of things that conclusions we've come to, or things we've realized rather, is that like the pictorialists, which was in the early 20th century, there's a school of photographers called the pictorialists, who basically like took the idea of with the advent of photography, it was regarded as a scientific medium, just a way of capturing. And the pictorialists sort of subverted that idea and said, listen, how can we transcend that, and how can photography be regarded as an art form? And so they really started kind of like to express, to sort of play with the medium and distort the medium and to defocus the images and start, much closer to sort of painting, really.
So who were examples of that, like Man Ray, or who were the pictorialists?
Well, Julia Margaret Cameron was one example of that, but her stuff is, her photography, as beautiful as it is, it very much feels like the pre-Raphaelite of like the 1870s and things like that. But I'm trying to think of specific names. There's a very famous photograph of the Flatiron Building in New York in the time, and it has this very odd sort of color cast to it, and it's they're very soft and dreamlike. Brady went to see an exhibition in Vienna when we were shooting The Brutalist, and he came back, and I was like, oh, that's what it is. Like, that's what we've been doing,
Oh my God, how amazing.
Well, I studied photography, and I'm ashamed to say that I was kind of completely naive of this school. But it just resonated, this idea of, and I think that's kind of why we work on film as well, because digital is such an out of the box digital camera, and even Kodak stock to a certain degree, as much as I love it, is quite a technically precise capture medium.
Interesting.
And I'm trying to subvert that and break that down. And the way that Brady and I have chosen to do it over the films is to sort of underexpose and to sort of drag the film up in the grade, so that ideas like photographic blacks we're rejecting, and we're trying to build the blacks up through purples and browns. I mean, you look at a Rembrandt painting, there's no black in there. There's no black pigment. It's all the shadows are built up through brown, you know. And so it's like, especially if because all three movies are period films. So it's like, well, you know, when you're trying to capture a period, as we know, we've all heard like heads of departments struggle with digital cinematography betraying the sort of
the period,
you know, the period kind of aesthetic. So I think what we're trying to do is combine this idea of this kind of dreamlike impression of a story and support it with that aesthetic. I was just going to find this one thing that I sent to Brady yesterday, which was this quote from Stanley Kubrick: "A film is or should be more like music than like fiction. It should be a progression of moods and feelings." You know,
I just got the chills, man.
And it's like, and it's interesting from like Kubrick, because I wouldn't immediately think of, you know, but you know, when you think about like The Shining or something, I mean, that's maybe a little bit of an outlier. I don't know, but I don't know. It's like, it's an interesting idea that a film owes this debt to music, and if the scenes themselves can evoke certain thoughts and feelings and emotions, it doesn't necessarily all have to. I mean, it's a bit like David Lynch, I guess, would be a version of that, which is why I say the Kubrick thing is a little surprising, because if Lynch had come out with that, I would be like, oh, of course that's, you know, makes sense, you know.
Nothing is of its own explanation. Is there a better...
Picture this, you're halfway through a DIY car fix, tools scattered everywhere, and boom, you realise you're missing a part. It's okay, because you know whatever it is, it's on eBay. They've got everything: brakes, headlights, cold air intakes, whatever you need. And it's guaranteed to fit, which means no more crossing your fingers and hoping you ordered the right thing. All the parts you need at prices you'll love. Guaranteed to fit every time. eBay. Things people love.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment. Anyway, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
Thumbtack presents the ins and outs of caring for your home. Out. Indecision. Overthinking. Second-guessing every choice you make. In. Plans and guides that make it easy to get home projects done. Out. Beige on beige on beige. In. Knowing what to do, when to do it, and who to hire. Start caring for your home with confidence. Download Thumbtack today.
Description of a cube than that of its construction.
I've said it before, but I find our conversations intellectually stimulating.
I agree with you.
Lol, how hard is it then to create that sort of nuance from modern technology? Like, I read you shot on VistaVision, which is like an old... tell me about that, and how hard is it to sort of try to recreate something that doesn't really exist commonly in modern day?
I mean, well, let's talk about the VistaVision for a moment. Okay, so VistaVision is essentially still 35mm film, but what it's doing is it's pulling the film through horizontally rather than vertically. So traditionally, a traditional motion picture camera pulls the film through 2, 3, 4 perforations at a time. If you take that 35mm film and you pull it through horizontally, like VistaVision does, essentially it's like shooting on a stills camera. So it's like the original full frame image. And so you end up with an image that's twice the neg area, you know? So it results in this wider field of view, essentially, right? So it's like, it basically means, like the clues in the name. If you take like the vistas of the Carrara marble quarries, for example, suddenly like
Totally.
taking the blinkers off. So traditionally, if you want to capture this bigger image, you have to be forced onto a wider angle lens, right? And then the wider angle lens that you use, the more distorted it is, you know? So the one, you know, and obviously if we're filming the architecture, I mean, when you photograph architecture historically, you tend to use sort of swing and tilt lenses and things that don't distort the lines of the building, you know? So if you're underneath the Empire State Building and you're trying to photograph it, obviously, you know, you this is happening. There are certain lenses like swing and tilt lenses that will, you know, or rectilinear lenses that will kind of correct that. Another way of doing it is to work on a bigger format, and therefore you can work on a longer lens, which is more akin to how the human eye sees it, right? So that was the one of the reasons. And then it also meant, like, if you take the moment where Laszlo steps off the bus and meets Attila, his cousin, in Philadelphia for the first time, and it's like one of my favorite shots of the film, where it's a very emotional scene and they're against the bus and it's this kind of, and they're embracing each other. You're very much kind of connected to, you know, we were quite physically close to Alessandro and Adrian at that point. And so you feel an intimacy with the moment, but at the same time, you sense the space around it.
100%. It like reminded me like of a Robert Frank image or something, where you got a sense of the scope, but also you were right there, and it makes me want to cry. Honestly, it's amazing.
Well, I thank you, and I think that's what. I mean, let's park that for a moment. But the other thing I was going to say was that Brady wanted a camera system, because so much of the movie takes place during the 1950s. He wanted to use a camera system that was of that time, you know. So Hitchcock, for example, used it on Vertigo and other sections of other movies, if not entire movies. And you know, some of the movie does, you know, the movie does owe a debt to these kind of films of Hitchcock and sort of like 1950s melodramas in some way and things like that. And then, so coming back to what we were just discussing, I feel that that choice of the VistaVision in many ways, like throughout the movie, I think people have spoken about the film having a kind of grandeur about it, you know, even in the intimate scenes. And I think the camera system, the VistaVision, helps that, because it's a bit like, you know, like the tradition of, if we say that like television has historically done a lot of stuff like that. I mean, we've broken out of that now. It's become much more a very sophisticated
medium
experience.
as well. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But, you know, there was always this thing that, you know, well, you know, film, you know, you're seeing a big screen. So therefore, you know, and I agree with that to a certain extent, that it allowed us to basically, like, the point is that, you know, it allows for two things. It allows you to experience the environment and the situation at the same time as you connect with the characters and with the performance, you know. So, and I think that's historically how we recognize cinema in a lot of ways. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. Was that, I mean, just getting back to the like technical, practical nuts and bolts, was even getting that sort of camera system a difficult task to do?
Yeah, it's challenging because the cameras are noisier and bigger. Well, they're not even, is it that they're bigger? I think it's just that they're kind of ergonomically cumbersome, you know, because generally, even if I'm operating with a 1,000-foot magazine handheld, if it's balanced on my shoulder, then all the weight is just kind of central and is on my, you know, it's not going anywhere. Whereas if you turn it on its side, you suddenly have a 1,000-foot magazine that's, you know, and if you're using it on Steadicam, which we did, what's happening is, as you know, with a Steadicam, obviously it's very finely tuned and balanced. It's like a sort of a gyroscope. It's kind of, it's, you know, it's very, very sensitive to weight displacement. So if you've got a 1,000 foot of film here, and then as you're running through, it's increasing on this side. Suddenly,
oh my God, no way. So how did you guys counteract that?
we ended up employing an incredibly good Steadicam operator.
That is amazing.
Attila Pfeffer, who's like a fighter pilot. It's like we've all like fallen in love with Attila.
He looks like The Rock. Like he could just
like a wonderful knight in shining armor. He's like so tall and just like he's a very he's a and just but he's
the gods of the camera department. Oh my God.
Yeah, he's like he's like a god. He's he was on The Childhood of a Leader, and so we've known him for a long time, and he's really wonderful.
So how much were you shooting steady and how much were you shooting on sticks? Like what was the sort of division of that?
I think there were certain, I mean, Brady is a filmmaker who even from he's incredibly assured, as I'm sure that much is clear. From the very first film that we did together, he has always the first thing to say, one of the things to say is he shoots very minimal coverage, right?
Okay.
Which is how he managed to do a movie like this in 33 days for the budget.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. So he basically, from the very first film that we worked on together, he throws down the gauntlet with these very sort of like ambitious wanners. So therefore that dictates often, if it's not handheld, it dictates Steadicam. And so a lot of that is coming from Brady, where it's like, well, I've always seen this moment where Elisabeth accuses Van Buren at the end of the movie. I've always seen it as a Steadicam scene, but I always want it, he's like, it's one shot, it's Steadicam, but then I want the Steadicam to turn into handheld and then back to Steadicam. And I was like, okay, but I don't want to cut. I don't want to use another thing. So basically in that moment, Attila had to take the Steadicam. And then when Joe Alwyn comes over and like out of nowhere and wrenches Elisabeth's, Felicity Jones's Walker away from her, then the whole Attila basically takes the camera and hand holds it almost with the Steadicam rig hanging off it. So he's suddenly operating in a completely different way, as if it was a handheld camera. And then it writes itself for the final sequence of Joe Alwyn racing up the stairs to find his father, he basically throws out these challenges, and then...
but like something like that, you have to sort of choreograph it, not perfectly, but it does have to capture all the things he wants. So is that a day where you're just doing the same take over and over and over again?
I think most of the time we end up squeezing something in on these days. Like I think that was probably our most ambitious, but it was probably not an entire day. But yeah, basically it's like scheduled that way so that we probably put a sort of time permitting scene on that day also, just in case we successfully. But the thing about that scene, it's a very long scene, and obviously with a roll of film we had about 5 minutes of film, and the scene was like 4 minutes and 55 seconds or something. So on one of the takes I remember we ran out of film, and from that point it was kind of real hearts in our mouths, because we're like, oh, we have an amazing performance, but now we're watching Joe Alwyn running around. We've no idea if suddenly on the monitors you're going to see this flicking of light and then the tail of the film, and you're like, oh, it's like, it's too much.
It is the worst, because like your actor's so in it and they think they're like giving the performance of their life, and it's like the film has run out. Those are the worst moments, and no one knows how to tell them,
Oh, and it's like I remember being as a loader, a clapper loader when I first started out, like a second AC, So I was like, we used to sail quite close to the wind. We would do these kind of naughty things where we would be like, and it was also testament to how good we regarded ourselves. So we would we'd be on 16 mil, and then we'd be like, okay, and then we'd know how long the take was. We'd know how long, and then they'd say, do we have, okay, is it, no, we're good. We can get one more out of this. And I was like, but then
Real
halfway
rebels.
through the take, they'd be like, okay, reset. And you're like, no, don't reset. Because if it went through on a take, you would be scolded.
Totally.
I mean, it's unacceptable. And someone's giving a performance and the film runs out. I mean, so we would sort of take pride and sort of like excite ourselves in equal measure
The cowboy loaders of independent
sort
film.
of like, okay, all right, you're going to call it? No, you know. So yeah.
I love that so much. Oh my God. But Lol, I had thought that this movie was shot on 70, and honestly, like, the camera department is really where I fall short in terms of like my knowledge as a producer. And so please forgive me, but 70 also sort of in theory gives you that sort of scope, right? What was the difference? Like, was there a conversation about that or no?
Yeah. Well, yeah, yes and no. I mean, only in the sense that, like, okay, we always shoot film.
That's a rule. You and Brady only shoot film. It was never even a discussion about digital.
No, not for these films. It might change. I mean, and then saying that, we shot like digibeta at the end of the movie, you know, for its own reasons. So it really is kind of a case by case, story by story point. And Brady would say the same. I've heard him say the same. But for these ones, it was film. The 70 mil aspect wasn't originally on the table, you know, budgetarily, or it was something that it was part of this way of supporting kind of event cinema that was like, listen, the film is 3.5 hours long. Got an intermission. We shot VistaVision. Let's have a 70 mil, theatrical release of this, But then the VistaVision lends itself, because of the bigger, the larger neg area, it translates, there's an obvious translation to the larger neg area of the 70 mil projection, So inherently with the 70 mil, you're getting a higher resolution, right? Because say you shot VistaVision and then you projected 35, which we also have 35 mil prints of, then you're not, you're sort of almost downscaling. You're not celebrating. You're not changing the aspect ratio. You're still getting the compositions remain the same, but you're not getting that increased resolution and that you're getting with the 70 mil experience, And I went to see IMAX. There's an IMAX version out there, but that's a DCP. It's not a film. It's not there are very few IMAX film prints. I'm sure Christopher Nolan, produces them, but
sure. But you saw an IMAX experience of The Brutalist, and how did you take it?
Oh, it's like another level in terms of just like scope and resolution and just kind of immersiveness. I mean, one thing that's interesting is like Brady wanted to embrace all of the artifacts of shooting film, so we didn't really dust bust as well. Like generally, dust bust and but he because he knew that if he dust busted, the DCPs would be very clean and would lose a sense of that film. So he's well, if we retain that, like we didn't add stuff, like we didn't add because that makes it a little too Instagrammy or something, like too forcing a look.
Yeah,
we need to stay pure to what the film produced.
Lol, can you just explain to our loyal listeners that like dust busting is basically cleaning the film, right? Yeah.
Yeah. It's traditionally, it used to be as you were in the labs, in the old photochemical process, you were literally kind of like, it was a very analog thing where you were, taking the dust off the negative with air, But now it's an electronic thing. It's an algorithm where it basically like finds all of the pieces of information within that image that are just either black or that are not part of what should be on the negative, and electronically replaces them. What it'll do is it'll take that pixel or that part of the image from the frame before, and then it'll drag it through and replicate it on the next image. Is how it works. But yeah, essentially it's taking out all of the grit and all of the dirts and the speckle, the little momentary flash of white.
Which is what made those like 70s films so, that's like what was so great about like.
When you used to go and see a movie at the end of the reel, because the end of the reels were where it was being handled more. As you got to the end of the reel, you'd see more on an old print. You'd see more of these flecks and scratches and stuff, and then you were getting to the reel change.
This tax season at Boost Mobile, when you buy 6 months on our best unlimited plans, we will give you the next 6 months for free.
Plus, enter to win up to $10,000 and double your tax refund.
Your refund, your rules. Requires upfront payment. Taxes and fees extra. Terms and exclusions apply. Visit boostmobile.com for full offer terms and sweeps details.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
You're right. This place is rotten. Landscape, the food we eat. This whole country is rotten.
I kind of want to know who your and Brady's inspirations are, because I did feel a lot of like Paul Thomas Anderson and earlier Coppola, and just like, who are the people that really inspired the work? Or did you guys not really speak in those terms? Was it more just artists and photographers and that kind of thing?
We didn't really speak in those terms. Like, we don't tend to. I mean, we definitely draw upon a knowledge of cinema, and Brady is, he's more knowledgeable than me. He's more of a cinephile in many ways. But I think it's this kind of like unspoken. We'll throw ideas out, and then we'll be like, it'll just resonate or feel correct in the moment. But it's obviously informed by a lot of other stuff. Like, for example, there's a shot in the movie where early on in the movie, Laszlo's been shaving and Adrian comes out with a towel over his neck, and it's this end of a zoom lens, and then we zoom out, and then he travels frame right, and then we track with him like this, and then he meets Alessandro, and then we keep tracking, and then conversation, then we zoom in. I watched The Shining the other day. It's exactly the same moment. Like, I was like, oh, that's interesting. It's like it tracks across. It's with like Jack Nicholson first coming in for his meeting at the hotel or whatever, and it tracks across, and then it zooms in, and I was like, okay, so obviously there's a kind of
Yeah, I mean, you're the product of films. You both are, obviously. That was your education, and so some of it must just like penetrate. I think that's probably true for most artists, don't you think?
Yeah, and I think a lot of paintings were referenced, like sort of Otto Dick's paintings of the 1930s, and like the images owe a debt to that kind of like mid. I think it's like American modernist. Like paintings like sort of Andrew Wyeth or Edward Hopper. Would be an obvious one. There's a lot of sort of opera-esque moments in the film.
Coming back to like some of the shots that I just loved, the one she ended up being the sort of reverse shot of the Statue of Liberty.
Yeah.
To me, it is so iconic and so representative of like the sort of invention and creativity, but also sort of a real reverence that you guys had for the medium of filmmaking and, past filmmakers. And so just talk to me about like those opening sequences on the boat and coming to America, and like what was the inspiration? I'm just like obsessed with that sequence.
I mean, it'd be interesting going back to the script. I must pull the script up, and because I haven't read it since we were shooting, so it'd be interesting to see what was in there originally. But essentially, Brady, again, it was like this ambitious handheld shot that Brady knew he wanted it to be this. It's the second scene in the movie. It's the first time we meet Adrian's character, Laszlo. And it literally goes from like, it's a really interesting scene because it does a number of things. It goes from a disorientated darkness that has been interpreted by some audiences as the camps of Buchenwald or Dachau, or like the concentration camps, which it never occurred to me because I always knew it was a ship, right? So that's an interesting thing. And then it ends with this kind of ascension, almost this climb towards the light, and this incredible kind of celebratory moment where Laszlo sees where he is, and we see where Laszlo is, and he's in the harbor of New York Harbor, and then towering above him is the Statue of Liberty, But it does a couple of things, because it's like in some ways it echoes his journey, you know, from where he's come from, and in his darkest moments in the movie where he's in like the jazz club or the brothel, even when he's kind of in these hedonistic, joyful moments, it's kind of dark and depressing. You know, he's injecting himself with with an opiate. He's you know, so it's like on the one hand that whole scene kind of embodies, you know, the whole movie in some ways. So it also represents the institute that he finally builds, because, you know, the institute is part subterranean and dark and denied of light, and then the top of it is kind of is reaching for the light and things like that, you know. So a lot of that stuff is kind of like it embodied in that one. A lot of those thoughts and themes are embodied in that one scene. But then the end of it, when we come out, it's this other moment of like, we called it kind of the untethered camera recently, which is like moments where the audience thinks it's one thing, the camera kind of upends itself and does something unpredictable. And I think also part of this idea of like what Brady's done across the movies is to have this kind of debt to a certain reality and a certain naturalism, but then subverting it in some way, you know, like the light feels quite naturalistic, and then suddenly a light source comes out of nowhere that's unmotivated, and the camera starts to kind of untether itself and tumble through the crowds and things like this. So it was kind of a stylistic motif that Brady's used across the three films.
Was those specific things scripted, or was that those sort of things you discovered on the day? And like,
no, I'd have to go back to the script, but no, I'm pretty sure it was all that it was unscripted, you know, and it was this, you know, I was talking to someone recently about, well, Peter Bradshaw, who writes for The Guardian, was interviewing me, and he said, oh, I realized it's like the end of Planet of the Apes. Like, what did it remind me of? And this idea, I mean, I didn't grow up in America, but the you know, Statue of Liberty is such a kind of global icon and represents such almost like the very best of what America can be, you know, and offer. You know, the very fact that it's placed right next to Ellis Island. I mean, it's sort of like, you know, it really does stand for something very, very good and true about America that in times like this is, you know, I'm sorry, but it's just under threat by the current administration. It just is. And so it's like, it's really interesting that it kind of represents this idea of this kind of like, it's subverted in the way that it's subverted in Ghostbusters and Planet of the Apes. It's like the statue should not be behaving in this way. You know, it's supposed to stand firm and on terra firma and be something that is incredibly reliable. So when it behaves unreliably, it's kind of really interesting. You know, it does something to the viewer because it's very hard to watch it being subverted in that way.
As you say this about like terra firma and flipping the most iconic image of America, do you feel like America betrayed Laszlo?
I think he realized that it was much more complicated and nuanced than the American dream is, you know, the idea of the American dream. There's a lot of simplification, and we're seeing it on both sides. Like this idea of drain the swamp. This, you know, there's a simplification, and as soon as, you know, like, and life is much more complicated than that and much more nuanced. And so the idea of sort of like, you know, I think that's what he realized, you know, or what America, you know, it's like, yeah, I think, so I don't think he was like betrayed, other than he sort of like, the promise was much more complicated than he was led to believe, you know?
To me, in a way, having grown up in the film industry, understanding the complicated nature of great artists and uncompromising artists.
Yeah.
I wondered what your perception was of Laszlo, because I heard some commentators say that like Laszlo is a perfect figure. Like he's just like a pure-hearted artist. And to me,
wow.
And yeah. I disagree with that.
I disagree as well. I think what's interesting is that Brady and Mona, who wrote the script, and Brady obviously directed it, and Adrian, who did such an amazing, you know, produced such amazing performance and managed to realize Laszlo. I like Laszlo, but he's a very complicated character, and there are a lot of things about him that I don't like or I don't agree with, in his behavior and his way. I understand. I think his intentions are true, but it's interesting because it's like, he's longing for his wife to come, but then he's quite cruel to her in many ways. And sure, I understand the sort of like sexual desire or physical desire or things like that, but it's kind of like he arrives in New York and then has these both arrives in New York and has these kind of like dalliances or liaisons with women, but then he also does that when he's flirtatiously, when he turns up in Italy and he's having that flirtatious dance with a woman, and he's just left, Elizabeth back in New York. So, I think like all of us, I think he's capable of being too many things at once. And I think, sometimes he's capable of being, the very best version of himself, but also the worst. And I think that's what's interesting about an examination of the human condition, is that unfortunately, I think we're all capable of that to some degree or another, whatever the motivation might be. And I think he is a conflicted character. And I understand that like they're all suffering and they've all come from this place of kind of physical and mental anguish and torture and anxiety. But I don't think it necessarily excuses all of his behavior.
I would tend to agree with you. And I would even go further in that, being a film producer is someone, and, you working with great artists, I have found myself being around people from time to time who their only concern in life is the art. Nothing else matters. Relationships, people, all those other things are secondary to the journey and the creation, right? And so to me, I find that to be a very selfish.
It's hard. It's really hard to excuse. I firmly believe that. I mean, it's hard to excuse, and I don't know if you can excuse it. I mean, at the end of the day, we've devoted our lives to making film, but we're not saving lives. And I know I said it before. Like I think if you look at the abuse of Shelley Duvall in The Shining or something like, I mean, it's not an excuse. It's just not right. I mean, it's just fundamentally not right. It's not correct for somebody to be put through that. It's not worth it. So I don't know. I mean, I have very robust conversations on set, but hopefully I'm not unkind. But, we're all under the kind of like, every day, we're under extraordinary pressure to make the days. Oh, any other, well, not any other job, that's disrespectful, but another job. Oh, I didn't complete today. We'll push it on to tomorrow. That's a big deal when you do that within filmmaking. So we're all under a huge amount of pressure to make our days. And we all signed up for, as a DP, like I try to cut my cloth. I try to be responsible on set. I say to the first AD before we start a scene, when do we want to be off this? And that for me is a response, is just being responsible to the money and to everyone else's time and blah, blah, blah. But Brady is an example, because early on in my career, I worked with filmmakers and I thought, oh God, it has to be this awful, arduous, tough process in order to get anything good out of it. And luckily, I sort of have since worked with filmmakers that I realized that's not the case, and Brady is a prime example of that. He's a very pragmatic, kind filmmaker, but supremely talented, And so, it is. But also, we've just, the tricky thing is we've slightly done it to ourselves historically because we've excused bad behavior because of, they're an artist, and we slightly got ourselves into that with auteur theory, with all of this stuff that has supported the behavior, it's just like, and I, obviously, we all know that in the last 5-10 years, things are hopefully changing, and all sorts of bad behavior, whether it's bullying, I mean, it doesn't have to be as aggressive, as obvious as kind of, sexual inappropriateness on set or whatever, but it's like even hope that just bullying and bad behavior and screaming at people and shouting and is also not tolerated. I mean, it doesn't get the best out of me, and I know I can do really, really good work, but if I'm in a situation where people are just being berated continually, it shuts me down emotionally. I can't connect in the same way that I know I need to. to do my best work, you know. Life's too short as well. I don't want to work.
That's sort of my philosophy these days, Lol. Life is too
The
short.
more I do it, it's like I do not want to work with people whose company I really don't enjoy.
I'm so with you. But it's only after like multiple experiences can you come to that conclusion. You really
unfortunately, yeah. And guess what? A lot of people who aren't in that position don't have that power or experience. Unfortunately, are still at the brunt of it. And it's obviously up to us as we are also managers of our department and stuff. It's up to us to recognize it. It's a lot easier not to do that and easier to just kind of like let things slide and just keep your head down. But it's not unfortunately we have a bigger responsibility than that, or fortunately.
To make switching to the new Boost Mobile risk-free, we're offering a 30-day money-back guarantee.
So why wouldn't you switch from Verizon or T-Mobile?
Because you have nothing to lose. Boost Mobile is offering a 30-day money-back guarantee.
No, I asked why wouldn't you switch from Verizon or T-Mobile?
Oh.
Wouldn't.
Because you love wasting money as a way to punish yourself because your mother never showed you enough love as a child?
Whoa. Easy there.
Yeah.
Applies to online activations. Requires port in and auto pay. Customers activating in stores may be charged non-refundable activation fees.
What makes a great pair of glasses? At Warby Parker, it's all the invisible extras without the extra cost. Their designer quality frames start at $95, including prescription lenses, plus scratch-resistant, smudge-resistant, and anti-reflective coatings, and UV protection, and free adjustments for life. To find your next pair of glasses, sunglasses, or contact lenses, or to find the Warby Parker store nearest you, head over to warbyparker.com. That's warbyparker.com.
No matter what the authors try and sell you, it is the destination, not the journey.
Lol, I kind of want to hear about like this journey of the past few months of like making a film that you obviously believed in, but this is one of those Cinderella stories of the year, right? And it's one of those films that is obviously transcendent. It is one for the ages, but how has this been for you? Like, has this been just like a lovely journey? And not that we need to talk too much about it, but I'm just so incredibly thrilled that you're on this journey. You're nominated for an Oscar. I'm incredibly hopeful for you because I think you deserve it.
Thank you.
Just like tell me a little tidbit about how it's been.
Yeah, I mean, I've really enjoyed it. I know other people that I've spoken to, other cinematographers who have been through this, and they've like, oh, I really hated it. But I sort of don't. I quite like being sort of going to sound very egotistical.
Acknowledged for a minute. I mean,
I don't mind being a little bit front and center for a moment. No, it's okay. Like I don't, it's actually made me a lot better at public speaking. It's been interesting to think about the movie in retrospect and to sort of tie up ideas and things to make conscious things that were possibly unconscious when we were filming. That's been really interesting. And of course, I feel like this has probably put me in a different conversation, which is really nice, because it just allows for a broader range of projects to maybe come my way or to work with filmmakers that I maybe didn't have access to before and things like that. Yeah, I mean, it's great. And I've also just met so many wonderful people. Like I was awarded the Robbie Mueller Award by his wife, Andrea Mueller. So we got to spend time, Annie and I got to spend time in Amsterdam and be in the house where Robbie used to live. And, and he's a big inspiration to me with films like Paris, Texas and Breaking the Waves. And, and so I just got to meet, I mean, you realize it's like the film community is really beautiful, but also within that cinematography community is really, really generous. There's a lot of shared ideas and generosity. And, even like a year ago, the fact I can meet Greg Fraser and, have a long conversation, and I'm suddenly like, or Rodrigo Prieto, or Anthony Dodd Mantle, or all of these people that I just suddenly I'm like, I don't know. It's like they've always been very open, but it's somehow been an enabler, the whole thing, to kind of like allow those conversations to kind of happen.
Talk about growth. That's extraordinary.
That's the best thing that come out of it. And then, well, actually, that's not entirely true. I think probably the best thing is that I'm hoping that it will allow Brady a little bit of an easier ride next time, even though he's not, I think he, coming back to what we said at the very beginning, I think he's very good at keeping himself on the straight and narrow. He's not suddenly going to want a budget of 50, 60, 70 million dollars. He's like, just want a little bit more to keep making the movies I want to make, and I think that's a pretty smart way to think about it. I mean, that's how he's talking about it currently anyway.
Do you guys already know what the next thing is?
Yeah. We're already talking about it. So it's going to, be a year or so, before we get into it. But it's, but also it's like, I hope that, I know it's more expensive to shoot film. However, on an $8 million budget a year ago, I spent a week, if not more, crunching the numbers, really getting in the weeds as a DP, because the director and I wanted to shoot film. On an $8 million budget, it was going to cost $200,000 more. I understand it's not nothing, but if producers and filmmakers want to do it, it's possible. And, I hope that this movie and the way it's received will encourage filmmakers and younger filmmakers, because I don't want film to go as an option. I'm not saying it has to be the only way to shoot movies, but I think it would be I think it would be a real shame if it went, and the only way to keep using it is to use it. It's like you have to just keep shooting film. And I hope that it also adds to the conversation about films not having to be a certain length. I hope that it reinvigorates or gives some weight to the fact that, I just feel like we've slightly been pushed into a corner with what cinema is. It's like, oh, it has to be digital. It has to be this length. And it's like, no, I don't think it has to be that way. And I think the fact that people are going to see the movie and it's making money and it's event cinema. So it's like, I think that's really healthy that cinema is kind of fighting back a little bit, against these kind of like what's become these kind of now preconceptions and film is dead and da-da-da-da-da. It's like, I personally don't subscribe to it,
I love that so much. That is like the perfect parting wisdom. You are a dream. I will be working with you. Mark my words.
I hope so.
Thank you so much for doing this with me. It was extraordinary to go down the rabbit hole of your brain. It's incredible.
I like that. Rabbit hole of my brain.
And please send Annie my love, and thank you. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. It was really enjoyable to meet you and to speak with you about it.
Oh my God, Vanessa, Lol Crawley, we have to work with him.
He's amazing. I mean, what a deep, smart, thoughtful person. Like the listeners didn't get to, we were on Zoom. I got to see his face and just the way he was explaining things. He is so sincere and he really does care about the art, but in such a refreshing and lovely way.
Such a thoughtful person. I can tell. I've actually heard about his process from other producers, that he is really someone who's there to serve the, filmmaker's vision, also bring all of its expertise, and also help the film get made in the time allotted. And that is such a magical combination. And to do it with such a lovely demeanor is, that's a rare combination.
Yeah. And I think the thing that people in the industry keep talking about is how unbelievable it is that this movie was made at such a low budget. And it really does look, it is an epic, but it does look so big. And he did talk about VistaVision and how using that really enhanced the look. But I just think it's so impressive. You can have all the tools in the world and you just have to be smart at using them. And I think he was so spectacular in this.
I could have talked to him for hours and hours, because there's so many shots in the film that feel like they were truly inspired and not just the next day, and so I feel like we got a little bit shortchanged, but I mean, what a glimpse into the mind of a great.
Yeah. And I think we never get to do this. So I get, when you were talking to him, I kind of wanted to know too. I want to understand what their intentions were. And I do think you guys had this conversation, but movies kind of come out into the world and then you lose control over what the narrative is, and everyone's going to project their own feelings onto what they think the meaning of it is. And I think it's so amazing to hear it from someone who was working so closely with the filmmaker, what their intentions were, what his opinions are, what he thought about Laszlo as a person.
Totally.
So cool.
All right, my dear. Well, you do the wrap up. That was so fun.
All right, guys. Well, follow us on Instagram at Hollywood Gold Pod. Go to our website if you want to buy some merch. We have a really great collection at staygoldfeatures.com. Click the merch tab. Go to our YouTube page. It has been revamped. We have some amazing video content and clips from the episodes. It's looking so good. Our producer, Andrew,
you've done such a killer job. We look like such pros. It's
made
incredible.
Us really spruced it up. I was like, like, what team came together to make this? It was just Andrew. It was very good. But go subscribe to our podcast wherever you get your podcasts, and keep listening, guys. We have some really good episodes coming up.
All right, guys. Don't forget to stay gold.
Stay gold.